Recording now. That's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Are we live on YouTube?
I don't know.
Well, in case we are, hi everybody. We will not spoil anything.
Yes, we are live on YouTube.
Oh wow.
Shall I?
Okay.
Should I get rid of that?
Well, is that okay with you, Sean? If we're doing this on YouTube? All
Doesn't bother me.
right, sweet. Let's keep it.
All right.
And so, if you're joining us in the live room right now, we're probably not going to be monitoring comments because this is more of just an interview tonight. But thank you for joining. And yeah,
Yes.
we'll get going in a second. But we have a very special guest tonight who just wrote this book that Jamie and I are both fawning over. You can't see it. Let me turn off my background.
I don't think you can do that once we're live.
Oh, that's right. We need to get the hang of the software first. Sorry, it's all very new. Okay, all right. I'm gonna get patrons pull up, and then we are ready to rock.
Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Let's go.
Thank you for your patience, Sean.
Oh, no problem. I know what it's like to learn a new software on the fly.
All good.
Okay. Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Prater, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Peter. I just said the wrong name. I was looking at our patrons. Wow, Patrick Green. We're off to a great start
Let's do that
tonight.
again. Let's do that again.
Let's just try that again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Prater, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Patrick Green, and tonight we are joined by Shaun Hamill, who wrote the just about to come out book that Jamie and I both have been loving called Alien Perfect Organisms. Fantastic title. And Shaun, welcome to Perfect Organism.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it's
Thanks
a
for
pleasure.
coming.
We got lots to talk about. And before we do, we're just going to give a couple quick patron shout outs. Let's go back a couple weeks here. We've got Lorna Folan, Danny Abbasi. What up, dude? Peter Hoskin, Adrian Johnson, and just like an hour ago, Paul X. I hope X is actually truly your last name, Paul. But if it's not, consider keeping it because it sounds pretty badass. Welcome to our Patreon. If you want to join them, go to perfectorganism.com/support or just search for us on Patreon. We have lots of things coming out. We're about to cover Andor. We just did weapons. And we have, what else are we doing this month? We're doing, Frankenstein,
Frankenstein, yes.
which is going to be a lot of fun.
Phenomenal. I saw it in
Yeah,
theaters.
so if you want to hear us blab about that, please join Patreon. And without further ado, Shaun, how's it going?
Great. So, like I said, so excited to be here. So excited to talk all things alien with you guys.
Awesome.
Nervous. I was very nervous to go right into the belly of the beast, so to speak, with an alien podcast right out of the gate. I was very nervous writing this book. So.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. And I'm just curious, how did this book begin for you?
This is a job I actually chased. So my first novel, Cosmology of Monsters, came out in 2019, and it was published in the U.S. by Pantheon, which is a branch of Penguin Random House. But in the U.K., it was actually published by Titan. And Titan, of course, as you guys, I'm sure, are well aware, has the Alien license and has for maybe 10, 11 years now. And has been doing a lot of, I think, great stuff with it. And as soon as, I connected those dots, I started sending emails, trying to figure out, like, who do I get in touch with to do something with Alien. And it was kind of a long process, actually, because I only had one novel to date. It wasn't science fiction. It was horror, but it wasn't science fiction. So I didn't have a big resume to recommend me or anything, but, I grew up reading the Dark Horse novelizations of the comic books. I read the books before I ever read the comics. They were a little more affordable because it's $6 versus, $2, $3 an issue, especially in back issue bins, before trades were widely available of this stuff. And so this had always been a bucket list thing for me, and especially, during COVID, which happened right after my first book came out, the RPG, the Free League RPG hit, and I started reading the book, and like I my obsession, it waxes and wanes, right? And it came back in full, during COVID, reading the RPG, and I was like, I have got to get deep into this world, and it was a long series of conversations, both with Pantheon, my U.S. publisher, because I had a contractual obligation to them, and so it was a conversation about like, would this breach that contract or not, and that got really touchy for a little while. And after my second book, The Dissonance, sold, while it was still in edits, I was finally able to come back to Titan, where I'd already been sort of establishing relationships, and be like, I've got it in writing. I am allowed to do this. Can I pitch? And so finally, in late 2023, I got the job. So this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Like, I grew up in love with the Alien universe, and like really became a reader reading tie-in books, Star Wars, Alien, movie novelizations, of the Alien movies to begin with, the Alan Dean Foster classics. So like, this is something that's really just in my blood, I think.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about your book is how firm. I feel like there's sort of two types of alien novels that come out these days. There's ones that are really just kind of their own thing, and it's kind of a one-off experiment and trying something very different. And then there's other novels that kind of seek, similar to what they did with the RPG, to kind of pull strands of different parts of the universe together into something a little cohesive. And yours, something that I love about it is it is sort of both of those things, right? Because in some ways it feels very different, but it also, you make a really great effort to make it feel very much part of the Alien universe, especially as it goes in a little bit. So your fandom is not surprising to me at all, because you definitely know your stuff. My question for you is and again, in terms of spoilers, we're going to try very hard not to do anything that's kind of plot based. And if you're watching this live on YouTube, maybe we'll accidentally say something. But if we do, Shaun, just do us a favor and just let us know, and we can go edit it out when it actually is released.
Sure.
What I'm wondering is, you have an amazing, antagonist slash, character.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting character in this. And I'm wondering how long, did you start this from a place of like, I have this, this Corinth character who's this kind of mad sculptor? Did it come more from having this idea of like the, the crew that is seeking to find him? Like, how did the story kind of germinate for you?
So, I started chasing an alien writing job before I really had an idea of what that would look like. I just knew that I loved the world, and I was now a published novelist, so I wanted to write in that world. And so whenever I was given the opportunity to pitch, Steve Saffel, who was overseeing the Alien line at that time, asked me to submit some pitches. And so I sat down and I really had to think hard about like, okay, what does alien mean to me? What do I have to say about it? That what can I bring to it that isn't just a rehash of what somebody else has done, hopefully, or at least bring my own spin to it. And I, one of the things that I had always been fascinated by, and I'm sure you guys are no different from me in this respect, was the those amazing special features, the documentaries that they did for all four of the first Alien movies in that massive box set. It was originally the quadrilogy, and I think when it was on Blu-ray, it's the anthology. If they ever put it on 4K Blu-ray, I will go out and buy it again. Just because it was such an education in storytelling, but also the film development process. And I was always very taken with the stories about the making of the original film, and the figure of Giger, who this sort of mad dreamer, whose, anti-establishment artwork became the face of this massive corporate franchise. And so I was reading, I was thinking back on that, and also reading Rinsler's Making of Alien book, which I had bought when it came out but had never read. And so I sat down and I started reading it, and just the photographs and thinking about Giger. And like, there's that great story I think Dan O'Bannon tells about Giger offering him opium, and him saying like, I need the opium to calm down my dreams. And this idea of the mad artist who's obsessed and, with this image. And I was like, okay, well, what if he's actually... And not that this character is based on Giger, but like the Giger birthing of the xenomorph sort of informed the idea of like an artist. And I've always also been interested in the work of Hieronymus Bosch, who did these really crazy religious paintings, and the idea of the xenomorph as a religious figure, which other comics and books have, of course, played with. And I think Alien Covenant definitely kind of touches on too, because there's a lot of the creator and the created conflict in the Alien prequel movies. So all of that was sort of in the stew and was really interesting to me. So it started with him, and then I kind of worked backward from like, okay, well, what does that story actually look like? What drives the story? What gives me the excuse to talk about these things that I think about, coming from a pretty religious background. My dad was a preacher, and I'm not a believer anymore, but it's something that's just part of my DNA as much as Alien in a way. And so it's like, how do I sort of mix that? And also, a lot of my work deals with mental illness and obsession. And also, a lifelong Alien fan. Of course, I wrote a novel about somebody who's just a little too obsessed with the xenomorph, and just working backward from there, and that darkness in me, that conversation, and the characters who were sort of seeking out this Corinth Block figure, like I wanted to have a character who sort of, even though they don't actually spend too much time together on the page, their stories are in conversation with each other, and there's sort of a question of a soul at the center of this, and like, what does it mean,
For
That's a long
our
answer, sorry.
no worries, no worries. Don't have to apologize. For our listeners and viewers, can you give us the setup for your novel?
Yeah, so the novel it's set an indeterminate number of years after Alien 3, not too far after, like we're closer to 3 than Resurrection for sure, but the universe is still recognizably, Aliens, Alien 3 era. And there is a ship called the Chariot. It's not owned by one of the mega corporations, so Seegson, Wayland, Yutani. They're independent contractors, and they are captained by the ship's owner, Cynthia Goodwin, and they are kind of at the end of their rope. Like they're basically just trying to stay in the sky at this point, like to keep, fuel in the tanks and keep getting work. And it's getting increasingly harder, and the ship is breaking down, and they're sort of desperate. And Goodwin is in a really tough spot, mental health wise and financially. And sort of out of the blue, they are offered a job that is a little too good to be true. A reclusive billionaire named Roman Fade offers them this contract where basically they have to track down his lover, Corinth Block, who has gone missing on a quarantined planet. And they aren't given a whole lot of information up front. They're just told, like, you've got to get him and bring him back. And we'll pay you some now, but, like, to really get paid, you need to bring him back to me. And so they set off to, retrieve this, and his lover is also this very famous artist who's kind of gone silent for several years now. He hasn't produced or shown any work publicly, so he's become a bit of a recluse himself and is a bit mysterious. And so the crew sets off on this journey, which they really don't have much choice in, because it's this or they're out of job, they're destitute. So they have a very real need to complete this work, even though it's sketchy, and they know it's sketchy up front. And as they're traveling, they're given some information after they agree to take the job, which largely comes in the form of this memoir by Corinth Block. And so as they're traveling, and I won't give away too much about, lots of things happen on that journey, of course, and that's a lot of the action of the story, but the Captain Goodwin is reading Block's memoir, essentially, which details his history with the sort of larger mysteries going on in this universe and his own experience with them as a young person, and how that takes root in him and blossoms over a lifetime, and sort of how it informs his choice to become an artist and his choice of subject matter. And so it's sort of a back and forth. And of course, there's monsters and horrible body horror and things along the way. But but that's sort of the arc of the novel.
We're talking about kind of the setup, and I feel like there's something about the way that we meet the crew of the Chariot that really endears them to me a lot. And I think it's partly because we've all been in situations in our lives like this, I'm assuming, where like it's tough. And I think Cynthia has a great line where she's talking about the fact that like they still technically have insurance because they're not like that broke yet, but like
Right.
who knows what's going to happen next. And it's very relatable. And I feel like that kind of carries through with the rest of the crew. Can you tell us like a little bit about kind of coming up with the crew members? Because I just think they're all very different and interesting. And they're kind of our entryway into the story, you know?
Yeah, there's Goodwin who is sort of almost the reader proxy, but who also is having some very unusual dreams that may or may not be related to some of the larger story going on. And her mother owned this ship and ran this business and is kind of a big figure in her life. You guys might have to help me with some of the character names because I wrote this book 2 years ago. There is the android on board, Compton, who is a lesser model, kind of discontinued, who they got sort of at a discount, but who is.
I love how he's early 40s, kind of balding. Like
Yep.
he's like they're like he's
Dad
not
bod.
quite attractive enough to be. Yeah.
It looks more like me, that he's sort of meant to put people more at ease than maybe a David model or a Walter, because Michael Fassbender, of course, one of the most beautiful men in the world, but less off-putting than maybe like even an Ash, or Bishop. Even Bishop can be a little, has some looks that there's a reason that like Lance Henriksen, he gets to play both sides of that coin in that movie. There is White, who's one of the cargo handlers, who's sort of a prickly character, but who speaks a lot of common sense to the crew when nobody else wants to hear it. There's an aging mechanic. I think his name is... What's the mechanic's name? Oh, gosh. You guys might have to help me out here. I'm in the middle of a move, and I packed my copy of the book.
I have it. I'm flipping through. Hang on. We got Kurzel. We got...
There's White. There's Cardonia.
Through the magic of editing, this will seem completely seamless.
Okay, cool.
Well, we don't need the names, but
yeah, there's an aging mechanic who's a little bit of a father figure to her, and who's basically keeping, in classic, sci-fi trope, keeping the ship going long past when it should have broken apart. There's Goodwin's lover, Sam, who is her pilot and who is very emotionally open in a way that she is not, and provides some interesting conflict. Like, he is ready to commit to their relationship, and sort of she feels something for him, but she's not really having an easy time grappling with that. And then there's Cardonia, who is the youngest member of the crew, who's sort of like the new kid who everybody's trying to look out for, who's the other cargo handler. And so they're kind of a family, a dysfunctional family for sure, but what fictional family isn't, right? Like, they wouldn't be interesting if they weren't. But nobody's a direct inspiration from anybody, but definitely, the book is dedicated to a bunch of friends who I go to the bar with on Wednesday nights. And the book was written at a time when found family was the closest family I had. So I think some of that energy definitely seeps into the novel, and hopefully warms the reader up to the characters early on so that it matters what happens to them later.
It absolutely does, and your dedication. I've read it like a few times. I really love it. It's almost like a story in itself, which is really cool.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I was there tonight, right before I came to record.
Nice.
I mean, I made sure to pace myself so I would be, in a good headspace to be a good podcast guest. But yeah, I never miss it if I can help it. That's
amazing.
It's a great group.
One thing I loved about your book, and I have not finished it yet, is the very trucker in space kind of blue collar worker vibe, and that things are going wrong. The ship is, their ship is not um, up to speed. Things are breaking down. Like things need all sorts, and but it's also taking a toll on the crew, and that juxtaposed with empire and working for corporations, and that taking its toll on them as well. I live for that kind of thing, and it's done really, really beautifully. And it really, you can feel the angst in these people that they want a better life, they want something more, but they're trapped where they're trapped, and they got to do what they got to do. And yeah, it's really, really, really great.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. That was really important to me writing it. Was I really wanted to make sure that these characters were up against the wall and in a situation where they kind of have to act, where they don't have a choice to go back or back down from this challenge. And very much inspired by the original film, of course, where the situation's not as desperate, but they're definitely like they don't want to go land on this planet aside from like Ash, and Kane, who's excited, like, but they have to because like they don't get paid if they don't set down on LV-426. So like, I was trying to kind of ramp that up, and I feel like late 70s, a lot of economic anxiety, and I feel like the times we live in are very similar, so we're seeing a lot of that right now, and I was definitely feeling some of that at the time. Luckily, nothing near as desperate as these characters, but like definitely feeling that pressure, and wanting to have the catharsis of writing about it. So I'm glad that worked for you. Thank you for saying that.
It really does, and that to my earlier point is part of why the crew in particular spoke to me so much, is because it is a very relatable human thing to not be totally sure if you're going to be able to make your budget for the month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like something that I love about Isolation, which I'm happy to say is all over this book, is Seegson as a corporation. And one of my favorite aspects of that game is, just reading the audio diaries and learning more about them and how they're just trying to cut corners so that they can like somehow stay afloat.
Yep.
And of course, Seegson is in your book as well. But what I love is that you go into that theme a little more deeply and look at it not just in terms of corporations struggling to stay afloat, but just people, like just these like little people that are just doing their job and are in danger of losing it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I didn't invent this insight, but definitely the first three Alien movies for sure are very much about like people at the margins kind of getting ground out. And, the corporations are the ones sort of doing it, but like it's just like there's no margin for people to comfortably exist, at least in those original movies. The prequels kind of go a different direction. So I thought it was kind of fun to play with both ends of that, take in the larger spiritual themes that Ridley Scott starts playing with in his later movies, but also kind of bring back that economic like terror, from the original films. So I'm thank you. That means a lot.
Your book really tackles body horror in ways we haven't experienced before, and I'm curious what your decision making process for approaching this novel, that to like say, hey, no, we're gonna deal with the black goo, and that's gonna be our inroad. And I love it. And I, again, in terms of spoilers, there's just a lot of things happening. Maybe there's like some collective consciousness going on, and you describe some crew members in the middle of transition in their bodies, and it's horrifying. And there's multiple of them, and what's actually happening. So I'm curious your process.
I don't think I'm a natural. It's kind of funny I ended up writing horror because I think I'm more. What comes more naturally to me is character. So I think that when it came to writing this book, the immediate challenge, because there's so much alien media, we've been eating well as fans for a while now, which is great, but also like there's so much that's already been done, and so it's like, okay, well, I have to find ways to make this interesting, or so that I don't feel like I'm just painting by numbers, And so I what I tried to do was take some of the imagery that I knew existed, because you can't really invent wholesale. You're playing in somebody else's sandbox, but like take some of the imagery that I found really striking from, say, Prometheus, or Alien. Romulus wasn't out at the time, but like Covenant, or you know even the original film, and try to like push that and like really get into what it would be like to be in the room with that, or even to see it over a video monitor as a kid who doesn't understand what's going on. And the way that I tried to write the book, and this is going to sound weird, maybe to you guys as longtime fans of the franchise, is I tried to write the book in a way that my friends or family who are not massive Alien fans like us could still read it and understand what was happening and experience these things almost as if for the first time, because the characters in the book are experiencing it for the first time. They don't know what they're looking at. But in a way that like people like us, you get some value added, because you're like, oh, he's nodding at this, or this is what's coming, which adds a special tension for you guys. But then for like my dad, say, who saw like maybe the first two movies when they came out and has not revisited, but still wants to be a good dad and support my work, that he could still read it. So I think that all of that was kind of part of the soup. But it's like, what scares me, what's intense, can I make this interesting to a reader and not just feel like I'm just going through the motions to collect the check, because this is the opportunity of a lifetime for a fan like me.
It's tough, especially because so much, to your point earlier, has been done, and it's been done to such varying degrees of success, whether we're talking financially or critically.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, where is kind of your inroad? And I guess to my next question, I don't know if you've listened to our show at all. It's okay if you haven't, but we actually started like, so Jamie did this for a couple of years before I was on it with some other people, and then I came on basically in defense of Alien Covenant when that came out, because I really loved it,
Me
and
too.
still do love a lot of it. Oh, nice. I could tell.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's all over this book.
yeah, and one of the things that I have frequently kind of gone to bat for in Covenant is that I think it's a beautiful meditation on creativity as something that defines us as being human. And I think so many other films get caught up in this idea of like, what makes us human is like our kindness, or is our adaptability, or our willingness to survive. But I really think to create is something that we kind of seek to define our humanity by. And Covenant looks at the kind of implicit horror in that idea, because there is some, I think, and
Oh
makes
yeah.
it very explicit, right? And so do you. And this is really the first thing since Covenant that I can think of that really gets into the notion that creation and oblivion are two sides of a coin that wouldn't exist without the other one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think you're articulating it better than I could have myself, but I think all of that was in the soup about like the because yeah, what David is doing in Covenant is like such a dark and horrific thing, but it's also like beautiful. Like those sketches and everything. I wish that I had that book that Titan had published, with all of the sketches that are on the walls and is, but it's a really expensive hardcover. Maybe I could get them to send it to me since I wrote a book for them. Anyway, yeah, I agree. I think that that was something I was definitely interested in exploring. And one of the things that I love about that movie too is like watching David do what he does. Like, but also like the brutality of it, like, but that there is love in there because, he's clearly in love with what he's making. Like, the chest burster scene, whether you love it or hate it, like there's clear love in David's face for the little chest burster that comes out as a tiny fully formed xenomorph. There. And yeah, it is interesting. And I think that it's beautiful. Like, and I think that that's Giger's monster defined, right? Like it's exquisite. It is a perfect organism, but it's also horrifying and it will destroy, and maybe that makes it the purest expression of life we've ever seen in popular culture, I don't know. But yeah, that I think all of that was kind of in the, a lot of times you don't, at least for me, I'm not I'm operating at more of an instinctual level. Like I outlined the book, but I wasn't quite sure. You know, it's like you chase something because you feel it, and you hope that you're communicating it. And it sounds like it came through. And no, I'm always happy to meet another Covenant supporter because I'm probably going to die sad. We never got the third David movie, so.
Well, I'm happy to say there's dozens of us. You know, there's at least 18, 19 Covenant supporters on the internet.
I'm happy. I'm happy to meet all of them if I get the chance because I'm a fan, and it was. I mean, I love to varying degrees all of these movies, but that one for whatever reason really spoke to me in a way that I was surprised by. Like as much as I had enjoyed Covenant or even the Alien versus Predator movies, or not Covenant, Prometheus. Covenant really struck me as an artist or an aspiring artist at that point, really powerfully. So I'm glad you're here to geek out about it with me.
And Covenant has, I think, one of the best, if not the best, bursting experience in the series. The backburster, like that whole
Oh
sequence,
yes.
scared me to death. It was horrifying, and I loved it. I loved it. I mean, essentially, my relationship and friendship with Patrick made me a convert to Covenant. You know, because I came in like I fucking hate this movie to I actually really enjoy this film. I mean, there's parts of it I don't so much, but yeah, it's really, really wonderful. It's got a lot of Lovecraft in there. It's a great thing. How were you when you were mapping out your story for Perfect Organisms? Are you given a roadmap from the studio, like do this, don't do this? Do they want you to do certain things, or they're like, hey, stay away from these things, but do what you want?
The only thing, the only explicit direction I was given before I turned in my pitch was stay away from children in danger, which
Mm.
is makes sense because Disney, but also have you seen Aliens? You know, it's like that's the whole movie is a little girl in danger. Like that's the crux of that film. When I turned in the pitches and they picked this one, which I was happy about because this was my favorite of the three that I wrote. Um, there were a couple of things they told me to be careful about. Um, One was cults and not glorifying them. Like it was okay to write about them, but I couldn't make them out to be good guys. And another thing was drug use, which I don't think made it into the final. This is sort of inspired by the Giger conversation with Dan O'Bannon about opium. Not to glorify drug use either. Like it was okay to present it, but to be measured and not like, hey, this will solve all your problems, kids. And both of those seemed like very reasonable requests. And I was worried because there is a child in jeopardy in this book at one point. I was worried I would get some pushback on that, but they let me have that without a fight. So I guess I didn't put them in too much danger, like, to raise any eyebrows. So, but no, they didn't give me any absolute do nots or do's. When I first started talking to them about doing an alien novel, it was originally going to be part of. I was originally talking to them about coming on for the Colony War trilogy that they did. And that was the one that didn't end up working out. And as much as I enjoyed those books, I think that I'm happy I got to do this book instead because I think that I would have had a harder time writing those books or one of those books than I would have the book that I did write. Like I think that the writers that they got, for my money, did a much better job than I would have. I remember reading them as they came out and being like, thank God I didn't get this. Like I'm sad that I haven't written my alien novel yet, but like I would not have been able to pull this off this way. That my interest in the things I can write well about are not necessarily, warfare. So, but yeah, that it's an interesting question, and I'd be curious if I ever get to pitch again, which I've made it clear I would love to do. If there would be other things I would run up against, I have a few ideas that I haven't pitched them yet, so I'd be curious to see what they come back with.
Might those ideas concern a continuation of this story that you've started with this, or is it you're thinking other kind of one-off things?
Um, I guess yeah. I mean, I would be happy. There are some threads, things that I deliberately left vague or to be not necessarily cliffhangers, but threads that could be picked up later. Like I feel like the novel is complete in terms of the emotional story it's telling for these
Yeah,
characters,
I
but
agree. It doesn't feel like it's unfinished, but there's a sense of like there could be stuff followed up on.
yes, yeah, and I would happily pick up those threads and see if I could do something interesting with that, if given the chance. But I also have some ideas that are a little different, sort of a different take on the. Apologies for my background. By the way, you can see I'm in the middle of a move here, so you can see my boxes and stuff. But yeah, I would happily do more of this particular story if the demand is there, and Titan and Disney are open to that.
That's cool. So, have you had any chance to talk with any of the other Alien novelists? And I ask this because Alex White is a really dear personal friend, and their novels are incredible. And I feel something of a kinship between this and some of Alex's novels. Not that they're derivative of one another, but you seem to be kind of circling some similar themes and some similar ideas. Do you know Alex or any of the other writers? Have you spoken?
Alex, yes. So I used to co-host a podcast. It's defunct now, called Fandom University, where basically we would like deep dive on a different topic. So like we did a series of episodes about Resident Evil, and we did the Halloween series, the movies. But we also did an Alien arc, and we got to talk to Alex right around I think it was right around the time Into Charybdis came out, and that was a blast. Alex was so much fun, and I was so intimidated because I'd read those books, and had been like blown away by them. And I like they had spoken to me in a particular way that, as much as I enjoyed, you know, most of what I've read in the Alien universe, like those two really like spoke to me, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is working on a level for me that really speaks to me as a reader and a writer. So I am honored to be compared to Alex. I feel like I'm standing in Alex's shadow. I think every Alien novelist is really in Alex's shadow for the foreseeable future, because those two books, to me, are the best of a line that I feel is incredibly strong. I was worried I'd be the guy to, fumble the ball, but I'm really happy to hear that, at least for you two, it worked.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to Alex's legacy a little bit with these novels, which I hope is not finished yet, because I think that they need to write more of them. But I think part of what was so special about both books is that they kind of expanded a little bit of what we expect out of an Alien novel. And I
Yeah,
say that, like you, I grew up reading all the Alan Dean Foster and, the Perry novels and all these wonderful, wonderful books.
right.
Very literary and very, I think, really well written, but very much sort of like fan content. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but I mean that in a sense of it's sort of like I'm here to extend my time in the Alien universe and to kind of have fun and feel like I'm living the movie or living kind of in the movie universe. And Alex came along and wrote Cold Forge, and it really felt like stepping into this like just total nightmare, like just this wonderful fever dream, scary. It reminded me a lot of the early days of Dark Horse comics, or Labyrinth, right? The novel as well as the comics,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
totally unsettling and interesting and thought provoking and intellectually stimulating. And so I think your book very much is aligned with that, and I think it feels like a book that fans will be extra receptive to, in part because Alex has helped kind of get that idea out there that Alien books can be a little bit more than you might think a fan tie-in content would be.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I hadn't really thought about it, but I think Alex absolutely did sort of pave the way for a book like mine, which I wasn't trying to like reinvent the wheel, but definitely there is some content in there that, and even point of view stuff. Like there is some first person narration, which I don't think I've seen in another Alien novel. Now I haven't read everything, but in most of what I've read, like that is not the usual style of narration. But also like the types of characters that Alex included, and the wrestling with gender identity and all of that, and the also just the crazy complicated political atmosphere, especially in Inda Charybdis, and like who survives and who doesn't is very surprising in both books, and even what happens to the characters who survive Cold Forge, the ones that we do hear about in Inda Charybdis is very surprising and shocking. No, Alex is an incredible writer, and I hope that they will revisit, the universe at some point and give us more.
I'm curious what speaks to you in the Alien films when you're watching them. We're all so different. We all come at this with such a different perspective, and I'd love to know what that is for you.
So for me, it's shifted over time. I think a lot of people who saw the films when they were young, especially those of us who grew up watching them on VHS, who didn't get to see them in the theater. At least the first three, like from 4 on, I was in the theater to see the new ones, Resurrection on. But I when I was a kid, I loved Aliens. Just Jim Cameron fan, period. But there was something really special about my first viewing of Alien. So I rented it from Blockbuster on VHS. I was 12 years old. I was at that age where my mom was like, you can rent what you want, but I've seen this one and it's pretty scary. And I was like, whatever, it's a movie from the 70s, it's going to be fine. And I watched it by myself at 2 in the morning on summer break. And it wasn't that it was like terrifying, but it was such an interesting, I'd never seen anything quite like it. There's such a dreamlike atmosphere in that first movie, like drifting through the hallways of the Nostromo before the crew wakes up, and the way that the score builds and stuff. I know Jerry Goldsmith had some gripes about how his score was actually used in the film, but I think it's amazing as used in the film. The derelict spacecraft, this sense of dark wonder that and I know that those prequels came along and they answered some of those questions, but originally it's like, we don't know what that thing is in the chair. Like, it doesn't look human. It looks 3 times bigger than a human, and its chest is burst. And why did it set down there? Why is that distress signal going off? Like, who put those eggs there? Why were those eggs there? And the film didn't answer any of that. It just dealt with like what happened to the people who found it, and I found that, like, the implications of it, and I didn't have the words at the time, but I remember it became a movie that I would prefer to watch in the middle of the night, like, because that seemed like where it lived, out in space, in the dark. And something about it has hung with me my whole life, and I think that's the thing that I always seek as a writer of fiction, whether I'm writing Alien or my original stuff, is dark wonder and the sense of majesty of cosmic horror. It's almost the inverse of the religious experience, right? It's the world is not the world, but what's beyond is so much more horrifying, whereas the religious experience is supposed to be, there's more and it's good, right? Most of it, and this is like, there's more and it's bad, man. Like, you don't want to know how bad it is. Like, you're better off not knowing. And I think that's what I love most about Alien, is when it can give me that I don't know, that frisson you get, when you're reading the best cosmic horror. And I love it's interesting you talked about earlier about hating Covenant. I think I've wrestled with pretty much every new Alien thing that's come along since Alien 3. Like Resurrection, the first time I saw it, I was like 14, and I was like, what was that? And now I love it. I understand why it's, but I think it's kind of wonderful in its own way, like, and Prometheus, the same thing. I walked out, I was scratching my head, and now I'm like, this is wonderful. It's just not doing what I expected. So I always like it when it can surprise me. But the thing I'm always after when I sit down in the theater is that sense of like getting a glimpse behind the curtain, you know. And I think that's the actual wording that's used in the book a few times too, is a character who is obsessed with like what's out there, what does it mean, you know. And I think the not knowing and the not being able to know, just the being able to ponder the mystery is wonderful.
Those are the best kinds of alien stories. And I got to say, speaking of cosmic horror, I definitely got a lot of cosmic horror out of this, which is great. And I think often kind of forgotten about, you know, with all the colonial marines running around and stuff all the time. I think people forget like Alien often functions best in the dark and in the mystery. And I'm really grateful that you gave us that. I just want to say, like, if in case you're not getting this impression already, this book, for one thing, is great. We're going to have a review of it up soon. But it also specifically is a book that is great if you are somebody who enjoys different corners of the Alien universe, like especially looking to kind of unite some of the prequel mythology with other things. But it also just, if you're a fan of place and setting, like the Chariot feels like a real ship. New Providence feels like a real place. Like it feels similar to Alien Isolation. It feels like you're looking at, I mean, in some ways you are literally looking at, you know, diary entries, but it's like you're looking at archival materials. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for being here. And I think, you know, honestly, we would love to have you back on again at some point in the future, because you are just as big a fan as I kind of assumed you were by the way you wrote the book. And it would be wonderful to have, you know, have you and Alex maybe come on together and talk a little bit about, you know, writing some of these
I'd
things.
love that. Yeah, anytime you want. You guys have my email address, so just let me know. I'll be here.
Awesome. Thank you
Sean.
so much, Sean.
You can't see it, but you're getting a ton of love in the chat right now, which also
well,
there's a
thank you,
lot of
everybody.
Covenant fans in the chat, so thank you everybody for chiming in support of that. We're up to I think 21, 22
Yay!
fans. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Thank you. Have a good one, guys.
All right, you too.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.